The veil in the temple tore from top to bottom, exposing the most sacred, restricted space on earth to the common air. That was the moment the gospel broke out of institutional control. We are looking at a profound disconnect today between the living message of Jesus Christ and the structures built in his name. We are exploring 5 truths drawn from the framework of the Plain Gospel Bible. 5 realities about the gospel that modern religious institutions often bury, downplay, or distort under layers of hierarchy and power.
The drift from a living, breathing movement to a static institution is a well-documented historical pattern. When you read the accounts of Christ in the first century, you see a figure who was in constant, deliberate friction with the religious power structures of his day. He brought a message of burden-lifting mercy, widened exits, and freedom from fear. Over centuries, that message has frequently been reverse engineered by churches into a system of control, worthiness metrics, and sacred image management.
Let us start with the first of these 5 truths. The gospel is about lifting burdens, not managing appearances. Modern church culture places a massive premium on the aesthetic of righteousness. You are supposed to present a flawless marriage, well-behaved children, and a calm, victorious demeanor. But the original context of Christ's teaching stood in direct opposition to that kind of performative religion.
Christ addressed this head-on when speaking about the religious leaders of his time. He pointed out that they tied up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves were not willing to lift a finger to move them. The institution of the first century was obsessed with purity codes, ritual washing, and visible adherence to the law. It was a worthiness system. Christ entered that environment and offered the opposite. He said his yoke is easy and his burden is light. The living gospel is designed to remove the crushing weight of having to prove your worth to God or to a community. Institutions, by their nature, survive on conformity. They need people to look a certain way to validate the organization's success. This turns the gospel into a behavior modification program rather than a rescue mission.
That demand for conformity leads directly to the second truth, often obscured. Christ came to defend the poor and vulnerable, not to protect religious status. When you look at the alliances Jesus made, they were scandalous. He ate with tax collectors, who were seen as traitors, and he aligned himself with the sick, the marginalized, and the poor. Institutions today often seek influence, wealth, and proximity to political power.
The contrast is stark. The early church, as described in texts like the Epistle to James, was explicitly warned against showing favoritism to the rich while dishonoring the poor. Historical records from the Roman Empire show that early Christianity was a movement of the lower classes, slaves, and women, precisely because it offered human dignity stripped of societal status. Today, large religious institutions often celebrate high-profile conversions or wealthy donors, giving them prime seats and outsized voices. This protects the status of the organization, but the living gospel is downwardly mobile. It does not seek a seat at the table of power. It goes out to the streets to find those who have been locked out. When a church prioritizes its own survival, its budget, and its brand over the defense of the vulnerable, it abandons the core mission of Christ.
Protecting the brand often requires a passive congregation, which brings us to the third point. Mercy is not passivity, and real love sometimes confronts power. We are often handed a sanitized version of Jesus, one who is mild, compliant, and always polite. This version is very convenient for keeping order.
That sanitized version ignores the Jesus who fashioned a whip out of cords and drove the money changers out of the temple. The institutional distortion defines mercy as being nice and never making a scene. But true mercy is fierce. When power abuses the vulnerable, love must step in and confront that power. We see churches teaching people, especially those in abusive situations, to simply forgive, endure, and turn the other cheek, misinterpreting that teaching to mean they should act as a doormat. In its first century context, turning the other cheek was a subversive act of defiance, a way of refusing to be humiliated by an oppressor. The gospel demands that we challenge systemic injustice and protect the flock from the wolves, even when the wolves are wearing shepherd's clothing. The institution fears this kind of fierce mercy because it disrupts the status quo.
That disruption of the status quo threatens the economy of the institution. Our fourth truth is that salvation is not a market controlled by institutions. Throughout history, we have seen the church try to act as the middleman, the toll booth on the road to God, which leads us to our final defining truth. Christ did not come to build a throne, but to restore sandals. The imagery of power in modern religion involves elevated stages, green rooms, specialized titles, and vast hierarchies.
The night before his execution, Jesus took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist, and washed the dirt and feces off his disciples' feet. That was the job of the lowest servant in a household. He told them that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, but it shall not be so among you. He established an anti-hierarchy. Yet look at the architecture of many modern churches. The pastor is elevated on a stage, lit by spotlights, separated from the congregation. The structures mimic corporate ladders or monarchies. The institution wants a king on a throne because a throne represents stability, authority, and control. Christ came with a towel and basin. He came to get down in the dirt with humanity, to lift the burdens of the broken, to defend the defenseless, and to set people free from the fear of an angry God. The living gospel is found in the dirt, serving, not in the boardroom, managing.
These 5 truths dismantle the machinery of religious control. The gospel is about lifting heavy burdens, defending the discarded, exercising fierce mercy against abusive power, receiving free access to God, and embracing a Savior who washes feet instead of demanding a throne. When we look past the institutional drift, we find a living Christ who offers genuine freedom. Next time, we are going to dive deeper into how churches turned this beautiful, burden-lifting gospel into a rigorous worthiness system, and how we can break free from it. Share this episode with anyone seeking the truth behind the structures.